Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into a collection of sources that, well, they really challenge our basic assumptions about what spiritual commitment is supposed to look like. We're sort of pushing past the usual metrics, the effort, the performance, the big visible sacrifices, and we're exploring this really profound tension between our own self-will and true submission.
That's exactly right. And the mission here for you, the learner, is to really get into that internal friction that comes with commitment.
Right.
The sources are basically arguing that the biggest question isn't, how much we do or how grand our gestures are. It's something way more intimate. It's, are we actually aligned with the will of ultimate authority?
And the thing that just immediately jumps out, the part that's so counterintuitive, is this provocative claim they make.
Yeah.
That even our biggest, most impressive sacrifices can carry the very principle of rebellion inside them if they're not the genuine fruit of submission.
Which is a total reframing of how we judge action, isn't it?
Completely. It means you could be incredibly busy doing all these good things, but fundamentally be missing the entire point.
It forces this necessary shift in focus. You go from looking at the external optics and the performance to what's happening inside, the internal transformation.
So where are we going to start?
We're going to look at some specific case studies from the sources, these historical moments, where key figures chose their own logic, cloaked in good intentions or zeal, over a simple, clear instruction.
Oh, okay.
And this helps us define obedience not as this, passive compliance, but as an active, deep alignment with the person giving the command.
So let's start with that classic example that just perfectly defines this tension, King Saul. This is all laid out in 1 Samuel. And his historical stakes here, they're really crucial. Saul is the first king of Israel. He's trying to establish his authority, his legitimacy.
And he gets this crystal clear military command.
Super specific. Go and completely destroy the Amalekites.
Right, and not just defeat them in battle. The command was total, a complete destruction of everything and everyone.
But Saul hesitates. The sources highlight that, he feels like a seasoned military leader who knows better.
Yeah, he thinks he has a better strategy. So he spares King Agag, the enemy leader, and crucially, he keeps the best of the cattle and sheep.
And his justification for this massive, selective disobedience.
He says he's doing it for God.
He claims he was preserving the best livestock so he could offer this grand sacrifice. He actually thought he was improving on the plan.
He was trying to negotiate the terms of his obedience. He replaced that specific, immediate instruction with a huge future performance.
It's like he was saying, I know you asked for X, but look, Y is so much more impressive, it'll honor you more.
Exactly. Which leads to the prophet Samuel's just devastating reply. It's one of the most famous nuggets in these texts.
Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed better than the fat of rams. For a king whose entire legitimacy rested on divine favor, hearing that, that would have been shocking.
It was a complete dismantling of his whole argument. And the source uses this to expose this terrible truth that acts that come from pride, from self-will, even if they look really spiritual, like a magnificent sacrifice, they're rejected.
So Saul was basically trying to pay off his disobedience with piety?
But God was interested in the ruler, not the rams.
Okay, here is where the language gets really harsh. I want to push on this a little bit.
Yeah.
The sources connect this self-willed action to the principle of rebellion itself. The text actually goes on to say that rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft and stubbornness is as idolatry. That seems a little extreme. Why is just being stubborn equated with something like idolatry?
It's because of what stubbornness actually reveals about the heart. Idolatry isn't just, bowing to a statue.
Right.
It's valuing your own opinion, your own will, your own path above the command of the divine. When you're stubborn, you are essentially worshiping your autonomy.
Ah, okay, I see.
The sources are clear that this kind of non-submission is subtle. It disguises itself as, good judgment or personal freedom or even greater zeal.
So if I'm getting this right, rebellion isn't always some dramatic, fist shaking at the sky.
Not at all.
It's selective hearing.
Yeah.
It's deciding that my bigger, more impressive act makes up for my refusal to obey a smaller, inconvenient order. It's following my own plan, but just using the king's name on it.
Exactly. And this is so relevant today. We live in a culture that just exalts autonomy, right? The pursuit of your own truth.
Absolutely.
And so the challenge for you, the listener, is realizing that holding on to parts of yourself, maybe it's a small habit, a relationship you know is toxic, or some vanity, when you're clearly called to let it go, well, that's just preserving the best cattle for yourself.
You're reserving a part of your will that you want to keep controlling. So the deep dive question here for you, the learner, is, are you resisting a small order, that quiet conviction about a habit or a relationship, while you're busy publicly offering some grand, visible sacrifice somewhere else to try and earn credit?
Because that slight resistance, the source suggests, is what breaks communion. It shows who is truly on the throne of your heart.
Okay, let's pivot. Let's move from Saul's external failure, his negotiation, to what the sources present as the highest expression of internal submission.
Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Exactly. This wasn't about cattle. This was a complete agonizing war of wills fought in, the silence of a garden.
And the sources describe the intensity of that moment. The prayer was so intense that sweat fell like drops of blood. His prayer was, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done."
And this wasn't some easy mechanical acceptance. It was a terrifying, gut-wrenching clash of wills.
It was a battle.
And the key insight, I think, is that the central issue wasn't just the cup of suffering itself, as terrible as it was. It was the Father who was giving it.
That's the point.
The battle was fought and won when Jesus discerned that the suffering was somehow part of the Father's ultimate plan. Once the who was acknowledged, the what became bearable.
And that is the definition of transformative obedience. It requires you to bow down not just before the command, the content of the instruction, but before the authority that issued it.
It's an internal alignment.
Yes, an alignment that lets that authority govern even the most intimate, invisible choices in your life. Your thoughts, your attitudes, the unspoken words that get stuck in your throat when pride just wants to scream.
So this moves us into that idea of denying oneself or taking up one's cross. For a modern listener, I think self-denial can sound a lot like self-harm or just becoming a passive doormat. How do the sources separate true submission from just giving up your personality?
That's a great question. It's about the deconstruction of self-sufficiency. True submission isn't self-hatred. It's the recognition that your own ego is a terrible master. The source identifies that self-sufficiency as the very thing that sustains rebellion and our sense of independence. When you truly submit, you are freed from what they call the tyranny of the ego.
So are the sources basically saying that our drive for absolute control is an addiction and obedience is the detox? Because we absolutely despise relinquishing control over our lives.
That's a really helpful analogy. Control is exhausting. The source is absolutely explicit about this. It says, as long as you insist on holding the steering wheel, you remain in conflict, and the result is exhaustion, frustration, and a constant sense of emptiness.
And submission is an active surrender.
Yes. It's not passive resignation. It's actively relinquishing the illusion of control we so desperately cling to.
Now, let's not gloss over the painful reality of this. Submission often requires facing real losses, giving up dreams you've carefully constructed, or confronting these deep structural fears.
Oh, absolutely. It involves suffering, just like Gethsemane did.
Yeah.
And the sources point to Hebrews, which reminds us that Jesus, though he was divine, learned obedience through what he suffered.
So pain isn't just arbitrary.
No, it's a tool. It's the training ground designed to shape our character and align our will. It's that necessary friction that smooths the rough edges of our self-will.
But the flip side of that difficulty is the relief that comes from grace, right? The sources bring up that verse from Matthew, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light."
Right.
Obedience might seem impossible when you just look at it through the lens of your own effort.
Yeah.
But when you intentionally step into the will of authority, you find that grace empowers you in a supernatural way.
And to illustrate that kind of costly trust, the kind that needs supernatural grace, the sources bring up the agonizing test of Abraham and Isaac.
Oh, that's the ultimate example.
It really is. God asked him to sacrifice the son of the promise, the one thing that represented his entire future, his legacy, the thing he could not imagine living without. It was dreadful.
And yet, he obeyed. He set out without arguing or trying to negotiate.
He had to trust that God was somehow capable of fulfilling the promise even after he had, killed the only vehicle for that promise.
That's incredible trust.
Exactly. And that obedience wasn't just a simple test of faith. The source says it was a portal for experiencing God's faithfulness and greatness in a way he never had before.
So for you, the learner today, The challenge is identifying your Isaac.
Mm-hmm. What cherished ambition, what relationship, what self-reliance are you being asked to place on the altar to prove that you trust God more than your own ability to control the outcome?
That's a powerful and very immediate question. We've talked about these huge life-changing moments, Abraham on the mountain, Jesus in the garden, but the sources insist obedience is not a single event.
No, it's a continuous daily posture.
It's in all things.
It permeates the mundane. It's
Yeah.
not about one epic decision. It's about 1,000 small, often invisible choices every day. It happens in the simplicity of the daily walk,
Like what?
like choosing prayer over comfort when the alarm goes off, or forgiving someone without waiting for them to apologize, or just remaining silent in the face of an offense to avoid responding with that flash of angry pride.
So those small invisible moments, forgiving that slight, managing that attitude, that's where the true authority of the heart is really proven.
Yes.
And neglecting those small acts is just the modern equivalent of Saul's selective obedience. We do the big tasks, the public commitments, but we fail to obey what was asked for in the quiet.
And that's why the sources emphasize vigilance.
Hmm.
We can't afford to see any area of our life as, like, independent territory. That small lack of obedience is like a tiny crack in a foundation. It starts invisibly, but it expands until the whole structure is compromised.
Let's talk about the external dimension of this.
Yeah.
The global impact. The sources suggest that obedience is a powerful witnessing to the world.
Absolutely. We live in an age where authority, institutions, tradition, they're all constantly questioned or even ridiculed. Rebellion is often celebrated as the height of authenticity.
That's true.
So when we actively choose submission, choosing the will of a greater power over our own personal desire, we're proclaiming that there is a heavenly governing kingdom. It fundamentally separates us from the values of the world.
And sometimes that countercultural obedience opens doors we could never have imagined. It demonstrates that real power doesn't come from human force.
The anecdote of Paul and Silas in the Philippian prison is perfect here.
They were chained, beaten, humiliated. And instead of complaining, they praised and sang.
Right. Their obedience wasn't an action they took to get out of prison. It was an attitude they maintained while chained inside.
And the response was incredible.
God responded not just by freeing them with an earthquake, but by using their radical compliance to reach the jailer and his entire family. That incident just highlights the mystery of it all. Obedience in your attitude can manifest a power that breaks chains and saves souls.
It also seems to function as a profound antidote to anxiety.
How so?
Well, seeking alignment with a higher will, like the sources reference in Matthew, it just sets our life priorities in order. Obedience in that sense is practically saying with your entire life, Lord, I trust you to manage my affairs more than I trust myself to control them.
That relinquishing of the ultimate weight of responsibility is profoundly liberating. You stop trying to carry the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And crucially, the sources emphasize that this isn't a solitary effort. It's a divine partnership enabled by the Holy Spirit. God calls the broken, the weak, those who know their own limitations, so that His strength is perfected in our weakness.
That partnership is essential because, as the source points out, obedience often requires immense patience. It's kind of like planting a seed, isn't it?
Yeah.
You bury something precious, and for weeks or months, it looks like nothing is happening on the surface.
But beneath the surface, God is moving. He's growing deep roots of character and humility long before the fruit of the harvest ever appears.
That's a great image.
And obedience requires that continuous, trusting posture, believing that the harvest will always come in due time, even if we don't feel or see the immediate results.
And finally, the reward. The sources stress that the eternal exchange is always favorable. What God asks us to give up, our pride, our control, it never compares to what He has for us. The sacrifice is never greater than the reward.
And the greatest reward of obedience isn't even the external blessings. It is God Himself. Obedience is the proven path to experiencing fullness of life, and it prepares us for that eternal affirmation.
So to summarize this deep dive, we've taken the source material and really followed this journey from sacrificial performance, which can be, fundamentally tainted by our own pride and will, all the way to the surrendered internal obedience that was modeled by Jesus in Gethsemane. The core lesson, really, is that our life is meant to be this continuous, moment-by-moment response to divine authority, not just a series of grand, self-initiated projects.
And we have spent a lot of time focusing on the difficult parts, right? What we have to surrender, self-will, control, the tyranny of the ego. But the ultimate affirmation of this posture, the motivation behind all of it, is the final vision described in the source material.
The vision of the final accounting.
Exactly. Visualize that moment, knowing that only obedience and love truly hold any value. The words we're all striving for, the ultimate recognition and eternal reward. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. That eternal welcome is the full payoff of a life lived in surrendered alignment.
That certainly puts the daily struggle into perspective.
It does. And if obedience is the ultimate act of worship, we have to ask ourselves one final provocative question based on the sources. What thorn, that irritating, persistent struggle, that weakness, that discomfort that's referenced in 2 Corinthians, is God allowing to remain in your life right now specifically to teach you that His grace is sufficient? And are you willing to obey and surrender even in the discomfort of that persistent struggle?